Imagine, demand and build a world transformed.
What we've got to do is be at the heart of people's day-to-day experiences. So for the next 4 years, if anybody thinks just waiting for the election constitutes socialist politics, they're living in a dream world, sitting watching interviews on Politics Live. We've got to focus on a totally different area, and that's going to be on working class communities, workplaces, unions, campaigns in our localities. Now, I'm Secretary of Labour's safest seat, as I said. We inherited a high Labour vote, and there are particularities about Liverpool. For example, the 31-year boycott of the SUN, a newspaper, no, a rag that you dare not say its name. This is part of a culture that is distinct, but we're not fundamentally different to some other safe seats like seats in Birmingham or Manchester Gorton. So Liverpool exceptionalism is not good enough. What we've got to look at is what activists are actually doing, what sort of connections you're making to be able to raise the Labour brand as a socialist party that is relevant to people's needs, even when our leadership is not fostering much of this work. So the first one I want to take you through is a campaign that's now become known nationally, and that is fans supporting food banks. 3 guys, Robbie Daniels, Ian Byrne and Dave Kelly, started with a wheelie bin outside Liverpool and Everton, collecting food donations. It's now a national institution that goes outside Newcastle on Tyne, Manchester City, Manchester United. And of course, Ian Byrne, on the basis of this, working class activist who was involved in a 6-month-long strike and helped to initiate this with 2 mates, is now the MP for West Derby in Liverpool. I would love to see every Labour MP with a history like Ian Byrne's, not another flipping lawyer. When I see lawyers and solicitors and spads and people who come because their dad was an MP, I mean, it makes me want to bang my head against a brick wall. We need people that are actually talking the language of their constituents. I live in the ward I'm standing for. I'm known for what I do in my locality. Then we've got homeless street kitchens, such as the Scouse Kitchen and the Hope Project, that have been going out week in, without delivering toiletries, food, socks to the homeless. Number one, it's morally right. But number 2, it brings people in who are not necessarily the immediate constituency of Labour politics, working with rough sleepers. And there is an international dimension. If you look there, you'll see that my living room is overtaken by toiletries, tents and stuff. And that is being sent out by the L6 Centre, a food bank in our constituency, through us and a charity that is called The Ripple Effect, run by 3 women in Lancaster and Liverpool, that's going to go out to the Moria refugee camp that was burned down. So the local then becomes international. And when you're engaged in these activities, you're combating racism and xenophobia organically, because it is natural that the experiences of people in Liverpool are matched by the experiences out in them camps. Some comrades set up a little gardening group that brightened grot spots around the constituency. I'm involved in a thing called the Friends of Rice Lane Recreation Ground, which is going to do up one of our open spaces that has been quite neglected. The other thing we tried to make sure is that for the last 5 years, since we assumed the leadership of the local constituency, that we were ever present on every picket line. 2 disputes I'll tell you about very briefly. The RMT, the rail union, decided to have an altruistic dispute to keep the guards on the train. They weren't going to get anything financially or monetarily. Week after week, they went on strike on the Saturday, and socialists from across the city joined them. And those picket lines became a crucible of discussion for the Merseyside CLPs, consolidating socialist influence. And we won. We won by sheer endurance. Obviously, it was the RMT who played the role, but we supported them rock solid all the way through. For the first time in a generation, you saw Labour banners on picket lines. Every constituency had a banner. Labour banners had disappeared from May Day marches. Suddenly they were there on the picket lines. The other campaign was a campaign to prevent the overnight closure of 2 fire stations. We had a series of meetings that packed out the Unite building in Liverpool. All 5 constituencies worked together, plus the constituencies in the Wirral, to back the fire brigade union to the hilt. That too was a successful campaign. And it produced, you know, there were pickets, there were demonstrations, there was, petitions, I've said it. Every time the fascists try to come to Liverpool, we make sure they're driven off the streets. We don't allow them to even start marching. And again, the constituencies were there at the heart of it. When the Black Lives Matter events, we're in one of the whitest constituencies you could imagine, but we make sure our comrades attend through the banner of Merseyside Together, an anti-fascist group, and we're there on the Black Lives Matter demonstration. One of them was 7,000 strong. The other thing, it's not just picket lines and campaigns. We have to know our communities inside out and develop a pride, a working class culture that's declined massively in the UK. One example we had of that, Robert Tressel, the author of The Ragged Trouser Philanthropist, was born in our constituency. And so we had 2 performances, each packed out in the pub where Liverpool Football Club was founded, the Sandon. And we then had a march, and I couldn't believe it. I was dead worried. I thought, if we get 50 people with a banner marching to Tressel's grave in our constituency, I'll be made up. 600 people turned up with a brass band at the front. It was absolutely magic. And there will not necessarily opportunities as big as that, but there'll be opportunities with socialist writers, Labour figures that you commemorate. Eric Heffer was the MP that turned Liverpool Walton from Tory to Labour in 1964, a fiery socialist. And every year we have an Eric Heffer lecture. The first year, Dan Carden, our MP, who's a socialist, did it. And the next year we had Ronan Burtonshaw from the Tribune. Going on to that, political education. Nobody stays a socialist because you run around like a blue arse fly. You stay a socialist because you've got a vision of a better world. And that means we have a monthly Tribune readers group at the moment online, and West Derby, our neighbouring CLP, is coming in on that. We had education events at the local art gallery, looking at the class nature of art. We had a youth event on the Green New Deal. Our youth officer organised it, and it had 130 people. So we had music, we had food, we took over a local hotel, and we paid them. I don't mean we occupied it. And it was a fantastic event. And again, it consolidates solidarity in a time when everything is designed to try and fragment us, the continual attacks on the left. A common bond of solidarity is vital, and political education backed up by social events can really weld people together like that. The constituency office itself is at the heart of the constituency in Anfield, and I think it should be a Labour rule that no constituency is allowed to have an office in an industrial estate which is inaccessible to its constituents. And our constituency office acts also as a kind of drop-in centre over benefits and the needs of the community. And finally, I've got to mention the pandemic, and it takes us back to food hunger. The greatest obscenity in our society is that you don't have ready access to food. So we've got a series of food hubs, shops that open, subsidise food. One of the ones I work in is the Walton Vale Community Hub. For £3.50, people get 15 quid's worth of shopping once a week. All volunteer-based, supported by a food charity. The L6 Centre in Everton provides uniforms, food, toys, support in the community. Amazing work right the way across the city. And they help to get these tents out to Lesbos. The Citron Close Food Bank, North Liverpool Food Bank, the Bridge Community Centre, working with vulnerable people. So our attempt...
You could try and wrap up, Alan.
I will do dead quick. I know, I always gab too much. Attempting to turn the party outwards to our working class community. Momentum, and I've put a link to join Momentum, should be the engine driving this approach. Our CLP has invited ACORN to prepare for the housing crisis. So at the CLP, we're going to have 3 speakers about housing, and we're going to mobilise to prevent evictions on the streets. We don't want CLPs where you die of boredom and procedure. That should not be what a CLP looks like. So wherever there's a struggle against evictions, against job losses, against racism, planetary extinction and war, momentum should be there with banners and flags, driving Labour forwards to a popular, transformative and radical agenda. As James Connolly said, our demands are moderate, we only want the earth. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Alan. That was an amazing contribution. I'm very sorry for jumping in because I was loving what you were saying, but also time is of the essence. But yeah, I'm sure we'll hear more from you as you participate in the breakout groups, and lots of food for thought there, absolutely. So next we're going to move on to our second speaker, who's Maliha Reza. Maliha is a young Labour activist who is a co-founder of Socialists of Colour and sits on the steering committee of Labour Tenants United. So Maliha, please give us your insights and perspectives on sort of organising in and against the party where you are.
Awesome. Firstly, thank you, Alan. I thought that was really insightful and what you covered was really brilliant. I think we tend to forget that a lot of people agree with our policies, but don't necessarily want to get tangled up in the kind of particulars of the party and the sort of Westminster bubble. So I think it's really important that we sort of touch based on that. I'm going to go straight into it and just talk a bit about kind of extra parliamentary organising and organising in different types of CLPs. So I got involved when I was fairly young. My kind of initial organising was outside the party. So when I was about 16, 17 years old, I set up a charity to basically help people in my local community get more involved with like education and work/employment kind of opportunities. And then I sort of slowly kind of fell into like Labour politics, and sort of just went from there. And then as I moved on to university, I became more active in my Labour club and my CLP there, and then started to organise in the wider party. And then I realised that it became a bit more trickier because of the type of CLP I was in. So once I moved from kind of a city CLP to more of a rural one, the way that I organised and the way I could organise sort of changed. And that was due to kind of the limitations that rural CLPs have. For example, when I started doing the stuff with Labour Tenants United, I realised that in the area that I live in, there's not really that many opportunities to get involved with tenants unions and stuff like that. Whereas in bigger kind of cities and spaces like Liverpool, Manchester, Sheffield and London, they have big groups of people and, you know, socialists in general can like get involved with. And obviously LTU and Momentum are finding ways to involve more people in this kind of activism. And hopefully it doesn't mean that you need direct access to bigger organising groups. Hopefully it means that you can sort of get involved wherever you are. And it shouldn't be something that is a barrier for us. And I do think rural communities can kind of get forgotten. And obviously we noticed this in the general election as well. So the seat next to me was, we managed to save it by 100 votes. And it was only after we put a big push from like the London kind of Young Labour / London Labour Students group that, you know, had to travel into our constituency and like push a get out to vote, that we managed to still save that Labour seat. So it is worrying how we do kind of tend to leave those communities behind. Obviously, the main kind of barriers that I find that we face is getting the party to trust extra parliamentary groups and activists. I think there is a need for the party to recognise this, and that often these groups are born out of a vacuum left in the party on certain issues. And I mean, a clear example of that is Liberation. And quite unfortunately, the party has been very poor on the issue, and there's no denying that, whether that's the AME representation or their kind of positions on trans rights. So obviously we've had groups like LCTR get set up, and obviously myself, I've been involved with Socialists of Colour, which is both in and inside the party, in and outside of the party rather. And it was kind of a response to sort of the lack of representation of socialist people of colour in Labour and beyond. Obviously, there are fantastic groups like LARAF, so Labour Against Racism and Fascism, that are doing incredible work and have worked with us too. But in terms of the party structure and the socialist societies that we had, there was very limited kind of representation. Obviously, our group was very fortunate to win over the trust of many members in the PLP, and we've had quite positive responses. And obviously, we were able to organise with established groups like LARAF. And I think these collaborations and people having trust in extra-parliamentary groups is crucial, because it shows that we are committed to working with socialists across the board and really kind of, you know, interact with grassroots members that have the ideas and are living the experiences that, you know, we need to amplify as a party. Kind of going back to more CLP level organising, in previous CLPs, I've had the sort of experience of a lot of projects were led by the EC, and so the executive committee, and then membership engagement with the projects were quite limited. And I think sometimes that comes into the CLP structure, and, you know, whether it's entirely led by the EC because the membership's not that big. That was an issue with the more kind of rural CLPs that I've been in. But I think we really need to push, and this might be something that's a target for the NEC CLP reps, but making sure that campaigns that run across the board are member-led and not led by those sort of elected, or at least the voices of members are at the heart of it. I certainly do think COVID-19 has changed how we operate as activists. Obviously, a lot of our activism has now shifted online, but also the type of activism that we've kind of focused on, I think, has shifted as well. So it's a lot more community based in like our rural CLP. A lot of it before was, you know, kind of holding the Tories to account and sort of voicing concerns that our members had about like potholes or simple things like that. But it feels like it's now kind of been a support network where we really sort of try and get together and make sure that everyone in our community is safe and fed and healthy. And I think that shift has been really eye-opening, and I think it's been nice because, in a sense, because it's really pushed CLPs to come together and actually organise and help out our communities. Obviously, a lot of CLPs were already doing that, but I think in my experience, our kind of CLP really struggled with that. I don't think we necessarily noticed a lot of the issues happening, because it was very much have your annual kind of CLP meeting and that's it, or go down to the pub, have a pint and that's it. But I think now we've really kind of recognised the need to fully get involved with our communities and help out where possible. I mean, so very early on during the crisis, we had a meeting as an EC, and we realised that a lot of parents that were getting the free meal vouchers weren't actually able to use them at our local supermarket, so they kept getting turned like back round, or completely like rejected outright. And obviously that meant that a lot of children were potentially going out without like meals, or they had no access to like the basics that they needed. So as a CLP, we began sort of fundraising, and the way we did that was making face masks. So you're kind of killing two birds with one stone. You're making PPE to keep people safe, but also raising money to make sure that kids are being fed. And really this was kind of something, you know, it shouldn't fall on CLPs to do stuff like that. It should be our government that's, you know, fixing all of this and not putting people in situations where their children are having to go without food. But unfortunately, we live, you know, under the system at the moment, and CLPs are crucial campaigning forces that can make a difference. And I think having that and being part of the sort of COVID relief / support system in communities is super important. And I do find, you know, I feel like at the moment, at this point in the Labour Party, we're really at crossroads where either we can go down a very positive route of really kind of encouraging our grassroots activists and making positive change and really kind of making it member led, or we could just stick to it kind of being like, I think Alan mentioned kind of being like the Westminster bubble and it all kind of being about like parliamentary politics. The reality is that the people that are voting for you are the people that, you know, are on the streets organising, the people that are making differences in our communities. And it is important that our voices are heard. And I think often as politicians, it can be forgotten, I think, from their perspective, what people are doing. And it is important that kind of have like, yeah, like I need to actually re-engage with my community and, you know, let them take the lead on this. And I think hopefully with groups like Momentum coming up behind projects like fighting for renters' rights and stuff and housing, that's a really positive step. And it should hopefully put pressure on the party to adopt, you know, stronger policy and make sure that, you know, all of our policies are really helping our communities rather than just sort of, you know, kind of being either a repetition of Tory lines to get back at them or whatever, or just being a very kind of poor opposition, I guess. But yeah, I think we really need to continue pushing, and, you know, it's difficult at times. Obviously, like a lot of, say for example, like Socialists of Colour, we've had a lot of pushback. A lot of it has been related to racism, I'm sure you've seen. And it can be really, I think, upsetting for a lot of activists that go through this kind of stuff. But ultimately, the thing that keeps us in the party and, you know, it keeps us pushing through is that, you know, it is the kind of parliamentary vehicle that can push change in Parliament. So if we still push them, we can get a lot of the grassroots stuff that we're working on pass through, and hopefully people do listen. And I think it is still important that, you know, we stay and we fight, but we don't let go of like our grassroots sort of roots and stuff. I hope that makes sense. But yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Maliha. That was absolutely amazing to hear from you. Right, we're going to move on next to Jane Marshall, who is a Labour activist and chair for Broxtowe CLP, who have been doing some really, really interesting stuff, which we're excited to hear about. So Jane, would you like to take it away?
Yep, hello, I'm Jane Marshall. I'm the proud chair of Broxtowe CLP in Nottinghamshire. For those of you trying to place it, it is, it used to be Anna Soubry's constituency. She took the 5,000 votes away from us that we needed this time to win. But it's now another Tory faceless empty vessel MP at the moment, so we haven't got our own MP. I know I sound like Jess Phillips, but that's all we've got in common. I am based in Nottinghamshire now. I'm here tonight as a strong advocate for community organising and the creation, where possible, I understand they wouldn't be possible in some CLPs, especially rural, of Labour community centres, Labour community hubs, fully funded by the whole of the Labour movement. We're very lucky within Broxtowe that we've got one. We haven't got an MP, we never had a Labour club. We've opened up our high street hub right on the high street. It's like Alan said, it can't be on an industrial estate, right on the high street where a tram stop. Okay, it enabled us to be back into left behind communities. And the Labour hub, community hubs, can you imagine, in all our CLPs or the ones with marginals, it works twofold. It builds and strengthens our relationships with our members and supporters. It gives us a common purpose, a sense of belonging together, somewhere to meet and organise. Our members painted it, decorated it, practiced it, built cushions, the tables were brought, people donated. There was a sense of real pride when we walked in there that that's what we'd created. Left Labour had created a space for us. And it was used for the first year for canvassing. It was a very, campaigning office. It was paid for by Unite and CW to start with. They paid for the whole rent and the utilities. We were seen as a marginal seat then, but we're so grateful for those to give us that. We now pay for it through our membership. Our membership is about 50p a month per member that pay for the rent. We still continue to do it. And it became a useful space. First year we were very inward looking, but we used it for branch meetings, council surgeries, our youth, LGBTQ and women's forums could meet there. It was a safe space for them instead of meeting in smoke-filled rooms, as it used to be called, in pubs. So youth had keys; they could meet any time they wanted to. We built a lot of banners for Pride or Reclaim the Night there. We had reading groups open to the public. We used to pick an article, and that was outside on a sandwich board each month. And then we had Coffee for Comrades once a month, where the public could come in and they didn't have to talk about politics, but they could come in and talk to us and walk and talk with your dog, involve the communities in that. And that was in our first year. And it was useful to have our council surgeries there, so people could come in on a Monday or a Friday and talk to some of the councillors there. And we also started at that point 18 months ago, put a few tins of food outside on the shelf, and we said, if you can donate and if you need, take. Found out that people did need it and people did take. And the first agenda item on all our GCs and our branch meetings was bring a tin of beans or pasta. We had to build up our food bank outside our shop through that. And by doing that, people used to come in. We opened up to the community more. Homeless people used to come in during the day. We were staffed 5 days a week, 10:30 till 3, by our wonderful members. And we used to have homeless people coming in, lonely people who used to come in for a cup of tea, a cup of coffee. And we were right there, right in the middle of the communities. So when COVID hit, they knew that Labour was here for them, that we had been here for them, and when, whether it's political or pandemics, that Labour would be there for them. And we opened up a pop-up food bank. That's been going now for 6 months, 5 days, 6 days a week sometimes. And we've gone from feeding 1 or 2 people, delivering 1 or 2 parcels a week. So in our peak, it was 200, 250 parcels. Yesterday we did 30 parcels. It's all packed and delivered by our members. New people have joined. We've got more members than we've ever had before. By people coming in, and even volunteers that see what we're doing. If you look up High Street Community Hub Broxtowe Labour, see that what we're doing, and people joined, and the first thing they had to do, even volunteers, contacted us on Facebook. We said, "Oh, you've got to join the Labour Party if you want to be part of it." We've got members. We've had more members join. As I say, we've had, I think, 60 in the past 6 weeks, which is quite a lot considering it's been a pandemic. We've fed over 10,000 people, and over 4th, and this is as Labour. This within our Labour. We feel that the church should have all the monopolies on food banks. This is as Labour Party. It was within our Labour values. It's what the Labour Party was initially set up to do, to help communities. So that's what we did. We said, this is what we're going to do. So we pack the bags, we deliver the bags. We do collections now 2 days a week. And as I say, we've done over 4,000 food parcels. We do a hot meal every week, jacket potatoes, and that's run by our youth, with the help from our campaign officer. So all our young members are involved, and that again is delivered right in the heart. We hire a hall. We base it from our community hall by our High Street Hub, but we hire a hall once a week, the most deprived area where child poverty is very, very high. We produce a hot meal, and this is as Labour members. I'll show you our carrier bag. We've got our own carrier bag. It says Solidarity Unity Broxtowe Labour. All our food parcels go in that. When I answer the phone to have the when people request it, it's Broxtowe Labour, so they know that Labour is here. But for these people, they see what they're getting first, and they see that it's Labour second. And that's a better way from what we were have been doing, previously, where we knock on the door and say, "Do you support Labour?" They see what we're doing for them when we need them. And when they phone up and they say they've never used a food bank before, I've said we've never been one before, but you've helped society in the past, we're helping you now, and you'll help it in the future. That is what society should be about. We also do recipe bags, where we provide all the ingredients in the recipe for families so they can cook together. So that was helping their mental health during lockdown. It also meant they had a hot meal as well, and it removed the stigma. Some of the food parcels, we do breakfast bags, and we've worked with local businesses, bakers, butchers, candlestick makers, all of them. So the pizza parlour that's next to us, they provided food one night for over 30, 40 families. They provided hot pizzas and delivered them for us. And so the Facebook post that we did for that night reached about 10,000, 12,000 people. It was such a good partnership. We get contacted by VPs, the council, all the schools pushed us when the free school meals failed. Schools were putting out emails to parents saying, "Contact Broxtowe Labour." Facebook page said, "Contact Broxtowe Labour, they will provide food for you when you need it." And we've never ever got that sort of publicity before. We work with domestic violence charities. We've gone to safe houses with food parcels. And we're working now with other food banks. Why this is important, it really should be funded by the National Party out of our membership. I think we only get £2.30, £2.90 perhaps from the NEC, might tell me, of our membership. And these sort of community hubs are what we need within, funded by the unions and by National Labour Party. And it's not charity, it's solidarity. We say we're gifting you a food bank in solidarity with you. Because the political decisions that make, standing shoulder to shoulder with food poverty, fuel poverty, austerity. We're here for you. Labour's here for you. It's a gift as an act of solidarity. We don't do any referrals. There's no referrals. We don't ask about bank details or your health. We say if you need it, we trust you that you need it. And when we go to the houses, and that's the system we've got at the moment. It's £10,000. We've got volunteers. We've got 50 volunteers on a WhatsApp group who help us every day. And it's really, really transformative how we do things. And in unprecedented times, it was the Labour Party that stepped to help to reconnect with the lost communities and rebuild what we once had. But now helping some other smaller groups within those communities set up their own food banks, hoping to sponsor football teams. And I think it goes back to one of our quotes was from somebody who said, I've never voted in my life, never voted. I didn't know what Broxtowe Labour community did. That's how they put us, Broxtowe Labour community did. But now you'll get my vote next time. It's not just about the vote, but it does help. They've never seen what Labour Party did. They've never seen that we aren't there just at elections time. And there's such a disconnect of politicians from this Westminster bubble. People who deal with their service users have not got a clue what Paul Mason's tweeting. They do not know I'm the Metropolitan Lead or what momentum is. They don't know that Keir Starmer's done yet another video. So disconnected. Any of the politicians, they see us as all the same. And that's across the board. The cultural divides that we used to have within Labour, and they felt that Labour didn't represent them. I think they do now. They're starting to feel that. I mean, one of the areas last year when it was the May elections, we took 2 seats out of the 3, which has been Tory for 16 years, and that's the area, the most deprived area, and it was Tory for all those years, and we took 2 of the seats, and that meant we take control of the local councils. It really does make a difference from what we're doing. And it's what the Labour left should be seen to be doing, that we're building within the communities, and we should be opening up the local Labour parties. And we let all the volunteers in. We should be really focusing outwards, not onwards.
You could just wrap up now, Jane.
Yeah,
sorry
this one. Yeah, and the Labour left needs to organise in areas over months, years, not just at the 4 weeks before elections. It needs to start now. I mean, it seemed to be at the heart of the elections. It's Labour Party in action, community organising in action, and it's socialism in action. And it's actively showing these communities that a better society may look like. Collectivism, not individualism. Cooperation, not competition. Social equality, not inequality. And that's what solidarity, community is about.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Jane. It was really, really inspiring to hear what you guys are doing in Broxtowe, and definitely a really interesting example of people doing, kind of extra parliamentary organising as Labour Party members, and really kind of, I guess, that inside and outside the party kind of hybrid. So that was really, really interesting. Thank you. So our final speaker is Sonali Bhattacharya. So Sonali is an activist and award-winning playwright, and she was elected to Momentum's National Coordinating Group in July. So Sonali, you're our final speaker. I'm going to chat to us about what's going on in your sort of a community and your kind of like local organising scene, and why you've decided to organise in the way that you have. So Sonali.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Hope. Yeah, it's been really fantastic and really inspiring to hear from the other speakers. Really just fantastic work going on. So thanks for that. So I've been asked to talk about my experience as a Labour Party activist in the hostile right-wing Labour seat and what my response has been to that. So a bit of background. I joined the Labour Party in 2015 after Miliband lost the general election in desperation. I found my local CLP impenetrable. When the PLP launched the first coup on Corbyn, I found out about a Momentum meeting locally, and I took my righteous anger along. And it was a relief to meet the Labour Party members who were angry about this attack on a leader elected by an overwhelming majority of us. I then joined our local Momentum group, who buddied me up with a couple of other lefties in my local Labour branch, and they made me feel much more welcome at my first meeting. As a result, I soon became active in the branch. I was elected as our first ever branch BAME officer, and I was also elected as a delegate to our Labour Party constituency general committee. While the PLP attempted to break Corbyn as a man, we organised a motion of confidence in his leadership, which was passed at an all-members meeting of our CLP by over 2/3. We also made some gains as a left caucus, winning branch positions, pushing through motions in support of radical policies, and doing all we could to transform branches into welcoming, inclusive spaces with a focus on local campaigning. We supported the Stansted 15, who included activists local to our borough, when they were prosecuted for stopping a forced deportation flight. We also campaigned against anti-abortionists who tried to set up a regular stall in our town square. We campaigned alongside Waltham Forest Save Our NHS and other local groups such as Stand Up to Racism. But over the years, we've witnessed endless factional manoeuvring from the right wing and hostility towards anyone who's supportive of Corbyn and all the manifesto commitments drawn up under his leadership. We've been constantly made to feel that we're not wanted in the party, and our achievements have been undermined and belittled. The right wing have effectively created a glass ceiling at the constituency level, which has prevented the left from taking any executive positions, despite the fact we're in the majority. This has made Momentum particularly crucial in Walthamstow as a vehicle to organise left activists who face ongoing hostility and abuse from the right wing. So Waltham Forest Momentum spans 2 safe Labour seats, Walthamstow and also Leighton and Wanstead. I think some Leighton and Wanstead comrades are here. There, the left wing work well with their far more collegiate Labour MP, and they've established an incredibly inspiring campaigning CLP, which is embedded in grassroots campaigning in their community, very much in line with what the inspiring work we've heard from in Liverpool, Walton and in Broxtowe. There's also one Tory marginal in Chingford and Woodford Green. So we were lucky enough to see Faisal Shaheen selected as Labour's prospective parliamentary candidate in 2018, and she launched a galvanising campaign straight away to establish herself as the people's voice for the area, the polar opposite of Tory incumbent and an architect of universal credit, Ian Duncan Smith. As Waltham Forest activists, we were fired up by having such a strong socialist standing in our nearest marginal, and Chingford and Woodford Green became a focal point of our campaigning. Over the 2019 general election, we poured everything into campaigning for Pfizer, who also drew activists from across the country. She slashed IDS's majority, but we didn't win Chingford, and that local loss compounded the devastation we all endured with the national one. Even before the election, I was conscious that our energies as left activists were being sucked into an endless factional battle with the right wing, and that we should rethink our priorities, focusing the talent and experience amongst our membership into grassroots campaigning and community and workplace organising. And that's why I stood for Momentum's national coordinating group, despite being someone who would ordinarily never dream of standing for a national position. I and many others could see the potential for Momentum's mass membership to become a campaigning force in and out of election time, for the energy and enthusiasm so many of us have put into electoral campaigning for Corbyn to be channelled into year-round organising to build socialism at the grassroots. As part of the new NCG, we're committed to reorientating Momentum towards our members. This month sees the start of a national member-led refounding process for the organisation. This will revitalise local groups, build capacity, confidence and expertise amongst our membership, establish strong working relationships between NCG reps and groups in our regions, foster networking within regions and collaboration between neighbouring groups, and create channels for members to have a say in Momentum's governance and political strategy. Local groups understand the concerns and issues in their communities and the nature and internal politics of their constituency and Labour parties. They can interpret national campaigns to work most effectively in their neighbourhoods and develop their own local actions based on priorities and needs. They know and are often already part of the trade union branches, campaign groups, mutual aid networks and community organisations that they can build power in collaboration with. Many local groups are already spaces that attract and cohere left activists, but we want there to be a vibrant, confident Momentum group organising in every part of the country, and that is pushing the Labour Party left, but also building socialism at the grassroots now. So if you're not a Momentum member, this is just the hard sell now, I'm sorry. If you're not a Momentum member, please consider joining. If you were a member and have left, please consider rejoining. Our aim is for Momentum is to become a movement building vehicle that turns its mass membership into the formidable grassroots organising force for socialism we so badly need.
Thank you so much, Sonali. That was really, really great to hear what you guys are doing in your area. And I think like we wanted to make sure that in this session we obviously had you know, representation from a whole range of different CLPs, because I think, you know, it's always amazing to hear about you know, CLPs that are kind of loads of like, they're controlled by the left, loads and loads of members, and are doing really amazing stuff, which is super inspiring. But obviously that's just not always the case for I'm sure there's many people on here who are in CLPs that are really not great. And so yeah, it's really great to hear a perspective from someone who sort of turned more towards you know, like a non-CLP organising, as it were. So thank you so much for that.
Some of the kind of very common themes was this business of a lack of a Labour Party office or community space that people felt was really significant, and I think you know, that was serious for several of the people on in our group. Interestingly, somebody also spoke about apathy amongst younger voters and how difficult it is to get them to engage. And somebody pointed out that as a young person, he moves around quite a lot, and it's very difficult for young activists to feel that they belong to a community and really get involved. So that's quite difficult. And I think when it came to community organising, something that was really interesting, we talked about how we shouldn't just support campaigns, but we should engage with them as socialists. But one of us pointed out, Luke pointed out, that if you're in an area where it's basically a very conservative area, a lot of the community campaigning that goes on is actually quite conservative, so you can't really engage with it as a socialist, which I thought was a really interesting point. Yeah, I'll stop there because I know we're short of time, but it was really good discussion. Thanks, everybody.
Brill. Thanks, Jane. Alessandra, would you like to go next?
Yeah, we also had a great group discussion, and some of the themes that came up were one of our participants mentioned the word like malaise of the left since the 2019 election, so maybe lessening enthusiasm. Something that was really interesting that came up from a couple of people was the idea that their local membership had actually increased, but it was more right-wing style members. And I think we didn't quite get to like social movements outside of the party, but we were maybe on the brink of starting to discuss that and then got called back. So.
Sorry, but thank you for that, Alessandra. Alex, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, we also had a great conversation. Some similar themes. There was a lot of frustration about how a lot of action within CLPs and the local Labour parties has just sort of stagnated since the pandemic. So since no meetings are happening, it's easier for chairs and secretaries to sort of block any form of action, maintain sort of status quo. We talked about sort of a lacking infrastructure for people to connect with their CLPs. So things as simple as being able to contact them. Some of the concrete issues that came up, sort of general issues, were food banks and homelessness and mutual aid groups, Black Lives Matter and political education. We had one participant who was seeing some action in our area that was also connected to local social movements working within the Labour Party, but that seemed to be the exception. Yeah.
Cool, that's really interesting, thank you. Andrew, do you want to go next?
Hi, yeah, another good conversation. So we mostly came from quite rural areas, but with like a town or kind of city hub. And one of us was from the, a busy, dense part of London, but there were similar issues. With the more rural parts, there were basics such as being able to reach everybody in the constituency. And then the hubs where there are resources and people who do a lot already, they would tend to attract all of the action, and it was hard to get that to go in the reverse direction. Also, in a way, some people are already doing things, and they might be working on something, and then you're asking them to try and do even more when you're talking about lots of community activities. There was an overall theme of trying to trust new members more, give them more responsibility, and let them use their skills more, and I suppose in a way kind of be more of a platform for members and the community. Don't always kind of lead on things, and build on some of the things and that have grown out of the pandemic. So yeah, that probably covers what we covered.
Awesome, thanks Andrew. Let's go on to Christine next.
So I think we were all from quite similar types of area as well, like all from basically from kind of fairly big cities that are quite solidly Labour. It's like Bristol, Newcastle and Manchester, and we were all reflecting on kind of the challenges of rocking up to nearby marginals. So I think it's Blythe, Kingswood and Bolton that we'd all been sent to door knock at election time, and feeling that it was really too late to make an impact, and how can we kind of do more deep organising in those kind of areas and sort of use the capacity and the energy that there is in the more active CLPs and the more solidly Labour areas, but in a way that isn't us just kind of rocking up to those places, but that, you know, is actually about supporting the local CLP and local activism that's going on, and again kind of reflecting on how the pandemic has kind of made it more difficult to figure out how to do some of that stuff. But yeah, feeling that was a sort of common challenge that we had. I don't know if anyone wants to add anything or if they feel that is a fair summary.
That's great. Thanks, Christine. And then I think final one is John.
Okay, yeah. So we had a conversation where people were coming from different perspectives in terms of their experience in the party, but we started talking particularly on the theme of the significance of the kind of battle within institutions such as the party at a branch level, the trade unions, and how much implication that has politically outside of those organisations. For example, the labour rights hold over the party has a significant political kind of significance across society, because the labour right has kind of extends into the trade union bureaucracy and other areas, and so we talked around that theme of the class kind of struggle within those institutions as well as outside. And then we did also talk a little bit about balancing or complementing commitments to the party and commitments to other organisations, whether that's momentum or social movements, and whether that was a case of either or whether that was a case of the two things feeding into one another, and issues of time and experience and stuff.
Awesome. Thanks so much, John. I think that's all the facilitators, but please someone shout at me if I've missed someone. So we were, until our plan got derailed, we're going to have a second round of breakout groups, but as it's at 20 to 9, sorry, we're definitely not going to do that. So what we're going to do is just open it up with a kind of final sort of like 10 to 15 minute open discussion with like all of us in the big group. And what we were going to do in the breakouts is we were going to look at those 4 that I just posted in the chat, those 4 kind of like categories, I guess, that are sort of, I guess, like common categories of like where people might feel like in their area that's like a really key priority, like building left power in your CLP, building community organising, running more political education, or potentially kind of building alliances with other organisations and groups. And so what basically we're going to do is, let's put it on gallery view so that everyone can see. Hopefully I'm not still spotlighted. Am I still spotlighted? No, okay, everyone, so we can all see each other. So basically, what you can do is you can put your hand up. So there's an option to raise hand, like on Zoom. You can also, if you can't find the raise hand button, then feel free to just post in the chat and say that you want to make a contribution. But what we'd really love to hear from anyone that wants to share is whether kind of off the back of some of the discussions we've been having this evening, is there like one specific thing or like one specific action that you feel like motivated to maybe take forward in your community or in your local area. So maybe an idea that you've heard of that you might want to try and replicate, or something that's come up in the discussions where you feel like, in my area, I think this specific thing is important, and that's kind of what I'm going to, you know, go away and think about more, or do some, you know, sort of take some action on. Yeah, it's really just like open to you guys. We just want to have a bit of a kind of open, action-oriented discussion, which is motivational to finish it with. So yeah, if anyone who wants to chip in, please like raise your virtual hand. And yeah, people just saying that you can find it in the participants panel. So if you click on participants, you should be able to raise a hand. But if you can't find that button, then please do just post in the chat, and we'll come to you and make sure you're unmuted. So does anyone want to kick us off with a concrete sort of like action? Ah, Chloe, okay, great. I think you should be able to be unmuted now.
Yeah. I think for me, we actually had a lot of new members join around the general election. And even though ours is a really, really safe Tory seat, it's been Tory since like the 1800s, we had about 50 people mobilised for the actual election campaign. And most of those 50 people, I'd say about half of them were new. So I think for me, the big thing is to try and reach back out to them and try and mobilise them in terms of other kind of work and really productive stuff. Often we get focused within the party in terms of, you know, let's do another round of leafleting. Let's, you know, go and do a round of door knocking where like 70% of the people that we door knock won't be in or won't want to talk to us. So I think in terms of trying to do some work, it's looking at the kind of productive things that we can do with those members, like both old and new, that we already know are actually quite keen to get involved and have already been quite active in various ways.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Chloe. That's really, really interesting. And also good luck in your endeavours of trying to sort of engage those people. I can see that Tom has got his hand up, so I think hopefully you can unmute now.
Yeah, thanks. I think probably the thing that we need to find a punchy way of saying to help build left power, and you know, both in our CLPs and at national level actually, is that the Labour Party is a site of struggle. It's not an expression of our personal morality, you know, much as we might like it to be. And that they've always been imperialists and bigots and racists and awful people in the Labour Party since its very inception. And although I'm very wary of sort of using that stay and fight mantra at the moment, because, you know, a lot of our leaders don't seem to be fighting, especially, you know, our supposed leaders don't seem to be fighting especially hard. I think if we could perhaps communicate that, you know, this idea that it's something that's contested and probably always will be contested, we might have a better chance of getting people to sort of, you know, be up for a rut, basically.
That's really interesting. So basically just being upfront and honest with people from the get-go, that it's not about like kind of being in like a friend's club or whatever, and it's not about, yeah, posturing, and it is a struggle. That's really interesting. Thanks, Tom. I'm going to go to the other Tom and then to Michael. So other Tom, you should hopefully be able to unmute now. Great.
It's Tom, you can't beat them. Anyway, I think it's really important to try and find two things. Firstly, what are the issues? I live in an inner city London area where 76% of the local population self-define as BAME. Yet quite often in the past, you know, if you organise, say, like a local street party or something like that, you'll find that a lot of the people taking part are white. I don't know where they'll come from, to be honest, because when you walk around the streets, normally most of them are Asian, you know, mainly Pakistani origin. But we took advantage of the Black Lives Matter protest. We had 5 in my Labour Party branch. And from that, we had sign-up sheets, and we've got around about 150 names of people who want to get involved in the local anti-racist campaign we've set up. I said to our group that one of our new members set up a survey, and people self-identified the kind of racist issues or issues associated with racism, I should say, that they were concerned about, be it in education, work, so on and so forth. But the critical question, I think, is a layer of our own Labour Party members that were BAME background themselves were feeling, lacking confidence to actually take a lead. And I think that's one of the things that we've got. We've got a whole raft. I know people like Alan from way back when, about 5 years ago, I think we first met. We've got a raft of very, very experienced people, but there is that danger that a lot of them feel they've got to do everything. And so the question is, how do we use that experience to develop this new layer of activists that are coming through? There's no one answer. There's not a blueprint we can all whip out of our top pockets. It's a way of sitting down and discussing with them. I've had discussions. I'm lucky I don't have to work anymore. I've had discussions with 15 local members in the last 2 weeks about how they can increase their involvement and take a lead on some of those issues. I think if you have that first conversation, it makes the solution to the problem that much easier. Oops, someone's banged on the door. Anyway, thanks for
right,
that.
on cue. Thanks so much, Tom. I think that's a really interesting contribution. And again, if anyone wants to sort of like come in as well, if anyone has, I think Tom's right that there's no easy blueprint solution to how you sort of like build up, younger people in the party and, empower people of sort of like all ages to be involved. But if anyone has any kind of thoughts and ideas around that, please do share them. So I'll go to Michael next, and then Luke will come to you. So Michael, you should hopefully be able to unmute.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Excellent. So I just want to build on something that the first Tom, not the second Tom, the first Tom was saying about the Labour Party being a space of contestation, and I completely agree with that. And I'm going to mention another term which I think a lot of people on the left find quite uncomfortable, and that's confrontation, and being very confrontational to the right. So just a bit about myself. I'm from a working class background. And in working class life, you always have to be confrontational because you've always got somebody confronting you and trying to do you down. And it's the case with the Labour left. The Labour right is very confrontational, and it sees politics as a trial of strength. And I don't think the left sometimes thinks of it in that way. So what the Labour left should be doing is, yes, within the CLPs organise, obviously get involved in extra parliamentary movements, build outwards. But I think what the Socialist Campaign Group in Parliament should be doing is developing its own programme, an alternative programme. It should be saying that in a post-COVID society, this is what we want to see be done. And yes, be critical of the leadership. You don't have to be as critical of Keir Starmer as the left Twitterati and use very choice language. But you can say, as I'm going to say right now, listen, there's 65,000 people who have died, right? Excess deaths. It's not good enough to say, well, the government are trying to do their best and we need to support the government. No. Set out why they're wrong, why their approach to COVID has been wrong, and set out an alternative. And I think that it's no good for the left to say, well, for the sake of loyalty to the leadership, we have to keep quiet and not set out an alternative. That, to me, I'm sorry to say, is a recipe for keeping the Labour Party on its current trajectory, which is, let's be brutally frank about it, a move back to the right. Now, it's not a move back to the right in, a la Tony Blair, but it's sort of going back to a sort of Gordon Brown-esque moralistic, this is what we don't like about the existing system, but there isn't really that much we can do about it except tweak around the edges. I think that the left have to be far more confrontational. To sum up, I'm sorry I've been going on too long. to sum up, the left need to be far more confrontational towards the right at the CLP level, and obviously link up with external movements outside the party, and also within Parliament. The Socialist Campaign Group must begin to take a far more robust stance, and to outline an alternative, because it's I mean that to me is I'm very annoyed, if I'm going to be honest, about the Labour leadership's approach to COVID, and I'm equally angry at the left getting in behind the leadership and not criticising the fact that this approach of giving the government constructive support or constructive opposition, whatever you want to call it, it's not good enough. So sorry about that.
Oh, I think a lot of people share your frustrations, Michael, so no need to apologise. Luke, you should be able to unmute now.
Yeah, I just want to talk a bit about, I know everyone tends to recognise that we've got serious problems in rural areas, both the Labour Party in general and the left as well, and trying to think about what building power is there, because I think it's quite a different question. It's more difficult than in cities and things like that. Because as was said in some of the breakout groups, is the sort of social movements you can organise behind are often sort of not the kind of thing that as socialists we should be organising behind, and things like that. And I think that one of the things to think about is sort of where we're talking about spaces and having spaces for local Labour parties and things like that, is isolation and loneliness is a real problem. In rural areas. It's a real problem in areas that tend to skew quite conservative as well. And one of the things that you can do if you have space is you can have social spaces. And so keeping in mind that we are, we're left wing, we're socialists, and we want to keep that. I think one of the things you can look towards is trying to set up sort of places for people to be and things for people to do with other people in areas where often those things have been completely cut away by the state and other things, and setting those up explicitly socialist as well, because you don't just want to make like a community hall or something and then nothing happens from it, but having like a socialist social space or something along those lines is quite a good way to think about building power in these areas that we've really struggled, especially where things are quite disparate, is you can have that as a way to bring people together. And I think that's something we really should be looking at going forward.
Great, thanks so much, Luke. Anyone else want to come in with any final thoughts on sort of concrete, like ideas for action they want to take forward from this meeting? John, I can see your physical hand on the screen, so if you you should be able to unmute now.
Okay, thanks. I think it's quite striking how many people in the chat are talking about they're in a CLP or branch where they're not able to meet. And so it's a real kind of barrier to actually getting things done at this moment. It's almost as if COVID is a gift to the blockers. And so I wonder if there's anything that Momentum or TWT could do to enable some kind of register or somewhere where people can say, yes, my CLP's meeting, or no, we're blocked, so that we've all got a better idea of what's happening across the country, as just some kind of way of enabling to provide pressure on the blockers.
Pressure on the blockers. Okay. We've got, oh yeah, Mark, you've got a hand. We'll take you, and then I think we'll sort of draw it to a close. There you go.
Yeah, I was just going to answer to John. I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about what can and can't happen. I mean, there's obviously been there was a lot of, can we actually meet officially as CLPs on Zoom? The argument has always been we can't use online meetings because those who don't have access online. But when you send a Zoom invite, there is a phone number that these people can call. And one thing I said in my exec, because we were having unofficial meetings, was the political education officer needs to also be a technologically education officer to educate people on how to use these methods, because we don't say we can't meet in person because of the disabled person who can't get into the room. So why should we say because somebody about 2 or 3 don't have either a smartphone or a laptop, we can't use Zoom or Teams or anything? And I think that the Labour Party needs to be a bit more clear on what we can do, because I wasn't clear that we could actually pass have Zoom meetings with motions. You know, you could take a motion to your full CLP, because I didn't realise that could happen. So thanks for letting me know, Alan, on that one.
Grand. Okay, cool. So it's 5 to 9. So I think let's sort of like bring it to a close there. Thank you so much to everyone for all of your contributions, all of your hard work, and all of your patience in particular for sticking with us through what was quite a turbulent technological experience. So yeah, really appreciate it. And I certainly feel like I learned a lot and feel like I've got a lot of things to go away from and sort of like churn through in my mind. I'm just going to post, if people want to kind of continue any sort of like conversations or contributions that might come to you after this session, I'm just going to post in the chat there. That's the link to, hopefully most of you are aware of this by now, but we've got this new online community forum that TWT has set up. You all should have been directly invited to it, but I think hopefully if you haven't yet for whatever reason, if you click on that, you should be able to kind of set up an account from there and join. And that's kind of a specific forum thread that's for this session. Yeah, please feel free to continue the discussion on there. Like, just because we're ending this meeting tonight doesn't mean that that's where the discussion stops. Yeah, so thank you so much, everyone. Thank you to our facilitators, and thanks to Matt for handling the tech issues. And yeah, please do make sure you sign up for other events that are coming up. I can actually announce, because it's literally just come out in the Independent, that next Friday we're hosting a conversation between Diane Abbott and Ilhan Omar. So that's a very exciting event that we've literally just announced. You're hearing it live as it's coming out on the news. So yeah, what an exclusive indeed, just especially for you guys. So yeah, we'll be getting the event for that. Will be launching literally as we speak. I've got to go and create it on the website now, actually, and we'll be sending an email out about it. So yeah, loads of other exciting events to get involved with. So please do check that out. And yeah, thank you so much, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your evenings.
View the full TWT20 program and become a supporter today to help us deliver political education all year round at theworldtransformed.org.